It is wild how this administration is informed completely by those who pledge to the fearless leader and with almost no regard for anything else. I mean, this guy, Hegseth, he sent on that signal chat an insecure communication pathway. He sent information, critical information about an upcoming, in fact, imminent military endeavor, and he included his wife on this same signal chat, and she has no security clearance.
And his brother.
And he did it. Why? Ego. He did it only for that reason. These guys they love to peacock, and they love that flex, the ego flex. And we're in a scary place, John. We're in a scary place.
I agree.
Now, tell me about this moment when it comes to Iran. I saw that the German chancellor said today, Israel has done the dirty work that the rest of the world needs to recognize. And he was suggesting that Israel, in this move of dismantling, derailing the nuclear capabilities of the Iranians, Israel has opened the door for the rest of the world. Can you speak to this moment and this situation? It seems complex, and maybe that oversimplifies it.
Well, first of all, the German chancellor is right. Let me remind you, the German chancellor calls it Israel. Do you know what the Iranian leadership calls it? The Zionist entity. They don't even recognize Israel as a nation. And of course, they are determined to destroy Israel. They've made it very clear that they have said that Israel is a cancer in the Middle East. And they even went so far as to say, how do you treat cancer? With radiation. And what is happening now is that the Israelis are doing the dirty work of the West. They have the unanimous support of Western leaders, and that is to erase Iran's nuclear capability. I do want to make clear about one thing that to me is important, and that has to do with the power of a president of the United States. I've had extensive discussions with you and on KGO, of course, on the question of the War Powers Act. We are not at war. Congress has not declared war. If the president decides to act, he will do it on presidential authority. I had the opportunity to interview Senator Tom Eagleton, who was the author of the War Powers Act and who ultimately voted against it because, as he told me on my program, he said, John, we're giving the president too much power. So let's be clear. The members of the Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, who choose to challenge the power of a president when it comes to moving troops and assigning them their tasks, there's no way to prevent it. This is not a declaration of war. This is a military action, and the president has full authority to do it, whether you agree or disagree. Let me also point out that you have people on the far right, like Tucker Carlson, and you have some Democrats, like Tom Kaine, who are opposed to this action. Tim Kaine, sorry. And so I think it's very important to note that there is a bipartisan sense of concern, but overwhelmingly, I believe Democrats and Republicans will support Israel's action.
Albert, do you have the what John is talking about with Carlson, Tucker Carlson, talking to Ted Cruz? Ted Cruz is kind of a, he's hawkish, to say the least. And here's a little bit of Carlson challenging him on his knowledge of Iran before he says full speed ahead.
How many people live in Iran, by the way? I don't know the population. At all? No, I don't know the population. You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's, it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who claims
anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the
I'm
one
not saying that.
who can't figure out
I'm
if it was a
saying
good
you
idea
don't
to kill
believe-
General Soleimani, and you said it was bad.
believe they're trying to murder Trump.
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe
we're
that,
carrying out military strikes today.
you said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive
No,
capacity.
we're not
at all.
bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
This is
Israel.
high stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war
we're-
with Iran right now, people are listening.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of grandstanding on the part of Carlson there, but
A little bit.
yeah,
A little bit. Are
he's-
you kidding me?
I mean, the political theater is definitely center stage, but I wonder if you could speak to the jihadism on Iran that does typify the kind of position that Cruz has.
Well, you have to understand there is a real division in the Republican Party. That is the Trump Party. There are those who favor military action and those who oppose it. Tucker Carlson, by the way, Donald Trump called him a fool the other day. It's very important to note that Carlson, who is one of the biggest backers of Donald Trump, does oppose American intervention. And we have known for years that Tucker Carlson doesn't really like Jews, and he's made that clear in a number of elements. So my point to you would be that Donald Trump is going to
When
make
did he
the
say he
policy.
didn't like Jews, by the way?
Oh, his comments about Israel and about Jews in the past have not been particularly complimentary, and you heard that particularly in his interview on Russian television. So
okay.
my point, by the way, that's another point, is he gave Vladimir Putin an absolute free ride.
Oh, he's definitely in the pocket of
So
the Russians.
my point here, and I think it's very important, is in the end, we can debate everything we want, but Donald Trump will ultimately make the decision. If you ask me what Donald Trump is going to do, let me tell you, he has everything in place for an American action against Iran. What that would constitute, how long it would go, that's the real question. And the other thing that we need to understand very clearly is that the goal of Israel is not to topple the government of Iran. What they want is the nuclear threat eliminated. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is talking about regime change. And that is a very important distinction. This is a powerful moment. And let's assume for a minute that the United States joins with Israel in taking out the Fordo nuclear plant. Then the question becomes, will Iran do what the supreme leader has said, and that is begin attacking American targets, meaning American forces in the Middle East? And I think this is a real question. And I think that is the major hesitation of Donald Trump. He doesn't want to be responsible or viewed as being responsible for that kind of action. You might ask me what I think will happen. I believe that in the end, the United States will back the Israelis because they understand it's in American national interest.
First, quick follow-up. Brother Rothmann is right about the platforming that Carlson did of Nazis and white supremacists on his show and beyond. So
thank you for that.
You're right about the Jew hating and the anti-Semitism there.
By the way, can you address the word "we"? Because Donald Trump has used the term "we" several times. That is to say, we control the airspace. The United States doesn't control the airspace. The Israelis control the airspace. We is a term being applied by Donald Trump, and that is why many in Washington believe he is aiming toward supporting the Israelis in a more effective military fashion. One other quick point. You're in Southern California. You may know that several months ago, young Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, the crown prince theoretically, spoke at the Nixon Library. And you can see that on the Nixon Library website. When we talk about an alternative for Iran, there are many who are pushing the idea of restoring Pahlavi, Reza, to the throne. And he has said he would be a bridge toward greater democracy. Well, the point is, you can't replace somebody with nobody. And the question is, who has the support of the United States if we go that direction? The Israelis are not saying that. The Israelis are saying, we don't care what kind of government you have. You want to have a radical Islamic government? Okay, but stay out of our way because we're going to respond. And what the Israelis have done, which is absolutely phenomenal, unprecedented in our military history, and I say the West collectively, is they have taken control of what the situation is in Iran militarily. We've never seen such a complete victory, not since 1967 when the Israelis destroyed the air forces of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria.
So when you say complete victory, you're describing the decapitation of the Iran.
No, I'm talking about controlling
airspace?
Iranian
Okay.
airspace.
I thought you were talking. Well, I was going to get to that, but they also took out all the Iranian leadership. They decapitated all their military.
And you know what was crazy? The Iranian leadership all went in one room. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, it was definitely it was miscalculation. I would say also, and I think it's relevant that I'll just use the word again: the decapitation of that military leadership is a problem for the regime of Iran right now, because from a military standpoint, you've lost your top strategist. So
he has no strategist. He has no army control. He has no intelligence. And by the way, you'll notice they have tapered off in terms of the number of missiles that are being fired into Israel. And actually, last night, they started using mobile missile launching because their basic grounded missile launchers have all been destroyed by the Israelis. At least that's the view up to this point. So when we go to West Point to discuss military strategy, Mark, as you and I may do one day, what you will find is that what the Israelis have accomplished in these 6 days has been one of the most phenomenal military victories in world history. And
Inlay says this isn't an Israel versus Iran thing. This is the world against Iran thing. If Israel doesn't do it, the USA must get rid of the nukes.
Correct.
Regime changes tend not to work long term.
And by the way, did you note in the G7, which after Trump left became the G6, did you notice their support for Israel was very clear? Now, in the end, there was no final declaration because Donald Trump declined to participate in a final declaration by the G6. So that's
Joan actually says what I think, which is Trump just wants credit if it looks good for Israel. I agree. If it looks like it was going well, which it did look and still looks like it's going well militarily, Trump wants to take credit for it. He was quick to jump in right away going, yeah, I knew about it. Yeah, I advised them. I sent them the plans. I flew the planes or whatever he wants. He wants to take credit. If it starts to take on water, and it will, John, this is why I mentioned it. This is going to start to take on water politically for him. He's going to lose part of his MAGA base that doesn't want anything to do with another theater of war. He may modify this position. I'd be very careful about counting on the American administration in the form of Donald Trump. He turns like a leaf in autumn. Like he literally just can be blown right off of whatever position he maintained doggedly the day before.
We agree completely on that.
Now, let me ask you about something that you touched on, and I think this is the whole thing. Once you've weakened Iran militarily, once you've taken care of this threat, and you will concede that the kind of uranium enriching that they're doing, subterranean, a lot of it hasn't been dramatically affected yet by...
At Fordo.
Right. So you'll need American help, I think. So all of that, let's assume it all works out. What happens in Iran politically is really a roll of the dice, John. I mean, you could end up with an administration there that could be more radical than the one we've just been dealing with.
I'm not trying to predict that. And I want you to know the Israelis have been very centered in their concern. They have said we have only one thing we want to deal with, and that is the nuclear threat. The rest, we are not involved in. And I think that is the important point, that the Israelis are acting in their best interest, but I would suggest in the best interest of the world. Look, who in the Arab world is most thrilled with what the Israelis are doing? Saudi Arabia. They've given the Israelis permission to use their airspace because the Saudis understand the threat of Iran. And you'll notice the deafening silence from the Gulf states, from Jordan, and the others, because they understand that what Iran is trying to do would subvert them as well. So I can't tell you what will happen the next day, but I can tell you that if the Israelis achieve their victory over Iran in terms of their nuclear threat, that'll be a big plus. And by the way, that helps Benjamin Netanyahu. You must know that in Israel, the entire country has united behind Netanyahu on this. All of the opposition leaders, all the people who were talked about as criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu on a variety of levels are now supporting this effort. I've never seen Israel as unified, frankly, since the 1967 and 73 war. It's astounding.
John, it's worth noting, don't you think, that the history of Iran is one that we have a lot of responsibility for?
Absolutely.
I mean, we overthrew a democratically elected
Mossadegh
leader
in
Yes.
1953.
Right. And that led to a lot of bad stuff, the installation of the Shah, and then, of course, the overthrow of the Shah, and then the regime, radical Islamic regime, and everything that followed, right? So as you go ahead, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, for every action, there's a reaction. You're absolutely right. And the Iranians constantly talk about the fact that we, the United States, subverted, if you will, their process. We reinstalled the Shah. And remember, every president after the overthrow of Mossadegh supported the Shah. Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter to a point. Remember on New Year's Eve when Carter was in Tehran and he toasted the Shah as our great ally and great democratic leader and all the rest. But that's years ago, and all we can do is look to the future.
Sure, but I'm just trying to say that the future is fraught with those kinds of issues.
Of course.
So even as we talk about installing, someone related to the Shah to take over Iran, you're talking about something that echoes to the past, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you will note, by the way, Ted Cruz did something very interesting in that dialogue you played. He called them Persians. When I hear an Iranian refer to Persians, I know they are anti the current government. It's a very important point because Persia was one thing and the Islamic Republic of Iran quite another.
I want to quickly get your thoughts on what is happening in American cities and the notion that you have American military in LA now, but being, if you will, deployed potentially to other U.S. cities. It's something that the president has spoken of. And he mentions it's because that is the core of the democratic center of political power.
He doesn't call it democratic. He calls it Democrat,
Yeah.
which is a pejorative term. You understand that I don't know if you read the opinion of Judge Charles Breyer, who is a San Franciscan, who was a graduate of Lowell High School, whose brother, Stephen Breyer, was on the Supreme Court. But if you take a look at the judgment that Chuck Breyer made, you will see, and I think it's very important to note, that he really struck a blow for liberty. He asked about the power of the president of the United States. This is a president who assumes that he and he alone has the right to make decisions. It goes back to the idea of a unitary presidency, which we've talked about. And the simple fact is that Donald Trump proceeds from the premise that only he can make policy. One of the most disturbing things I've heard in the last few days was Donald Trump saying, it's my situation, I'm the president, I will make the decisions. And I think that, frankly, smacks of something none of us want. We don't want to have an autocrat as president of the United States. We want consultation. But let me emphasize what I said earlier. The War Powers Act does not restrain the president in a situation like this. And I think it's very important to note, Tom Eagleton, as I mentioned, who I interviewed several times, voted against his own measure because he felt that it gave the president too much power. So you'll be hearing now about members of Congress, including Ro Khanna and others, who are trying to say, well, you've got to go to the Congress. You don't have to go to the Congress if you're the president. Not on this. A declaration of war, yes, but we haven't had a declaration of war in this country since December 11th, 1941.
But I'm sorry, let me just wait. These two things are sloshing together. You're saying that the president is within his power to do militarily what he feels need be done without congressional approval. Is that what you're saying?
That is the law.
Okay. But back to America's cities, is he also within his power to turn the military on them?
That was what Chuck Breyer denounced and said.
So legally he's not, is the point.
Well, in terms of sending Marines to Los Angeles, I believe that it violates the law of the land. We don't use our military against our own citizens. And by the way, do you remember when after January 6th and the election debate was taking place, that The then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff refused. He made a public statement, General Milley, that we will not use the military to intervene in American politics, pure and simple. And what is President Trump's response? He'd like to see him recalled to the military so he can be court-martialed. Court-martialed for what? Insubordination. So I'm only pointing this out because it has to do with the view of the presidency. It is vital that we understand how important it is who is president of the United States. May I say one word about the demonstrations which took place last Saturday? And I just want to say, we are not a monarchy. We are a republic. And as Benjamin Franklin said, if we can keep it. And what you saw graphically, brilliantly, was on that same day, June 14th, the president's 79th birthday, the viewing stands in Washington, D.C. were vacant. People were not turning out for a military parade, which, by the way, cost $50 million. And I'd still like to know where the hell they're going to get that money.
Oh,
because
they'll get it.
Yeah, I know. They shouldn't.
Play for Brother Rothmann, the Alyssa Slotkin stuff. It works well with what he's talking about.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Albert. This is from just probably 2 hours ago on Capitol Hill in the Senate with Pete Hegseth testifying. This is Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator from Michigan.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs. You said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later, you've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, but I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those people,
officers.
throw them in the jail, 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision, right? So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's their job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing, authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man, list it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are
okay,
there
so
to,
say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement.
Do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
Who are trying to do their job,
Okay.
deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous
So
administration.
they cannot
The previous
arrest and
administration,
detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As
Is
we've
that right?
stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily
Okay.
detain and
Have
hand
you-
over to ICE. But
have
there's no
you given-
arresting going
have
on.
you-
And you know this better
Have
than
you
you're trying to
authorized
play
the
political
U.S.
games.
military
There's
to
no
use
arresting
cyber
of U.S.
tools?
Okay, so what you're seeing
It's shocking. It's shocking. And by the way, Elizabeth Slotkin, who I vigorously supported in her recent campaign, is absolutely tremendous on this level. And I believe that what she has done is phenomenal. And I think it exposes what is a fundamental defect in the Trump administration and the way they're proceeding. and it's something every American ought to understand. To use armed forces violates the law. The Posse Comitatus Act forbids it. And by the way, just so we're clear on the Watts riots, the then governor of California, Pat Brown, was out of the state. The authorization was given by the acting governor, Glenn M. Anderson, who represented Southern California in the Congress for many years after he was lieutenant governor.
Well, the Watts riots, the 1992 Rodney King
I was in L.A. for the Rodney King riot.
I lived in L.A. at the time, and I will tell you, we were glad to see the National Guard there. But as John has pointed out, I mean, it came through the channels that the National Guard is typically, through which the National Guard is deployed.
I know we don't have time to do this, but people should go to Judge Charles Breyer's decision, which is now on appeal. It's before another court, a three-panel court rather, and we're going to see how it comes down. I'm going to suggest to you that if Chuck Breyer's decision is upheld, he should get the John F. Kennedy Profiles in Courage Award for doing exactly the right thing. That's exactly what the judiciary is supposed to do. And I do believe that when you listened to Pete Hegseth, you understand why he should not ever have been confirmed as Secretary of Defense of the United States.
John, love our visits. Thank you. You can find John Rothmann on his podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothmann. It's a brief blast of veritas thought that he offers every day to his subscribers.
John, I will see everybody a week from Thursday.
For June Swoon. I love that. Yeah.
Well, I want everybody to support what Mark Thompson is doing. This voice is so essential, and I have now delighted. I was trying to bow when you asked for the appropriate obeisance.
I do want a little fealty. I want a little of that Donald Trump fealty that everybody seems to have on display in Washington.
They are kissing my ass.
I know. It's a great thing. I don't get enough of it here. But I love seeing you, John Rothmann.
Good.
See you next week. John Rothmann, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.